Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mari, and I'm an avid scrapbooker. If you're new here to my channel, welcome. And if you are a longtime subscriber, welcome back. I am going to be doing a 12 by 12 scrapbooking layout today here using this photograph of my son. I'm just showing you Jordan in the photograph here. This is a 4.2 by 3.2 photograph. And I'm going to just to leave a little bit of a border around this photo. I'm going to trim it up here in a minute. And you will notice that I'm doing a bunch of pointing and all sorts of things here in this video. I was going to do this as a live without a voiceover, but due to some technical difficulties, that didn't work out for this particular layout. So this is a longer video than usual because it was meant to be a live, but so I'll try to explain as much as I've left in here as best I can, and I hope that all of the hand movements that you see me doing here aren't too annoying. So I am going to show you here on this photo that I did put this picture into PicMonkey, and I did a little bit of a text on top of the photo here. So you can see here there's the word kitchen and an arrow pointing to that window up on top of the building that Jordan's standing in front of. And this is his apartment that he lived in the city that he just moved from. And I'm just showing that this is the tiny little window that was part of his kitchen. His apartment was really, really small. When he moved into this place, the housing in the area that he wanted to live in was very limited. And so his apartment was really tiny. I'm going to be using this sketch today that I'm just showing you here. This is from a Scrapbook and Cards Today kit called Acorn Avenue, I believe it was called, and it's from last fall perhaps, or the fall before. And I'm using a whole bunch of products from my stash today that were parts of fall kits. So I wanted to do a fall themed layout with this photograph because the photo was just taken very recently, and we are well into fall here in the province that I live in Canada. And so I am going to use a fall inspired color scheme today. So I'm going to be using some of the One Canoe 2 Creekside collection. That's some of the papers I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using this red side here that kind of goes along with Jordan's red shirt in the photograph. There's not a lot of colors in the photo. There's lots of whites and blacks, and then that red. I'm also going to be using this piece of textured cardstock that was in one of the kits. I think this is called Fawn or something like that. It's just a really nice, soft, light brown. And I just thought that it went along nicely with that fall theme. So I'm going to be using that for the base of my layout. And then you can see there's all these horizontal stripes as part of the sketch. And I really wanted to stay true to that. I like those elements of this sketch. And I really like this design for a masculine layout specifically. So now I went in and I just grabbed a bunch of the different papers from some of the kits that I had pulled materials from. And I really love these papers that I'm showing you. I'm not going to use all of them, obviously, but there are 5 horizontal strips in that sketch, and I really wanted to go ahead and use 5 strips. And 2 of the strips, the top strip and the bottom strip, are the same color. So I'm going to use that red paper at the top there as the repeating pattern or repeating color. And then I'm also going to be using a yellow, a black, and eventually a grid paper. So you'll see that I am going to add that in a bit later. What I'm going to do is cut all of these strips off camera. And I cut them in 2-inch strips because I was going to lay them over top of each other. So just like overlay them. And so that I think there's about 1.5 inches of the patterned paper that ends up showing for each of the strips. So I thought about going with these 4, but then I decided to use that yellow instead of that text paper. And then, like I said before, I'm going to use that red at the top and the bottom, and I'm just showing you that. So that'll make 5 strips. And I end up actually changing that second paper there that's got the plus signs on it for a grid paper a little bit later, but you'll see me do that in the process as I go through. So at this point, I just was pointing out that my photo is a lot smaller than the photo in the sketch. The photo in the sketch was 5x7, and I'm using a smaller photo. So that's going to have an impact on the placement of things on this layout. This is the cutter, the trimmer that I use to cut my strips. It's my very old and well-used Stampin' Up! Guillotine trimmer. I love that for cutting this sort of thing. You can see that on this sketch, there's a larger empty space at the top, at the bottom, rather than at the top. So I'm just showing that my plan was to leave that, brown paper wider at the bottom than at the top. But when I put these papers down, it doesn't end up being that way. However, I am going to trim this whole base part of this layout down because I'm going to do a bunch of matting. As you know, if you follow me, you'll know that that is something that I really, really love to do. So I'm going to get these strips stuck down, and eventually I'm going to size this down. This is a really old paper from Cartabella. I think this is from 2015 or something like that. So this is a really old kit. Love the Cartabella papers. I think they're so pretty. I love the texture of them. I love how this mustard color paper is really distressed looking, and I think that's really neat. I like that there's a little bit of black in the base of the layout as well. And I'm going to repeat black on the layout here and there, and you'll see me doing that. I love using the repositionable adhesive. That's the Kokio tape runner that I'm using there, just to get things into position. And then there will be a more permanent method of attaching those papers. So I stitched each one of these strips to the layout using my sewing machine. And I just showed you that there, just that I did that stitching on the edge of each one. And now I'm just taking and distressing with my fingernails the edge, the sewn edge of each of those strips. Now, I want to mat my photo, and I decided that how I was going to do that is take a piece of craft paper and put it through an embossing folder using my Big Shot. So that's what you see me doing right there. When I take that paper out of the embossing folder, it's going to have this really neat texture, and I'm going to mount my photo onto that. And that just adds just a little bit of extra interest to that photo mat area. I'm going to pop the photo up on some 3M double-sided foam adhesive, and that'll just give that photo a little bit of pop on that cardstock. I also backed the photo onto another mat, and that is a paper that matches that plus sign paper. That's the second strip from the top. I am going to change that. I think that's the third time I've mentioned that, but you can watch for that as I go through. I'm just talking here about how I really love to use dies as much as I can in my scrapbooking process so that I make use of them. Dies are not cheap. And so here you can see that I cut a tag, which was something that was suggested at the top of the sketch there. And I also am going to take a punch and cut another shape here out of that black paper to go along with that tag at the top. So I just trimmed each of those down, and you see I've just stuck them in the top there along that first red strip. Now I'm also going to take some more My Favorite Things dies, and I'm going to take the stitched rectangle stacks. I'm going to use those two dies to create the little journaling spot areas at the bottom of the layout, which is suggested on the sketch. I thought I might use my Stampin' Up! Project Life die, or Project Life card die, I guess is the way to say it. But I decided to use these other ones, the stitched rectangle stacks instead. So now I had off camera just done a little bit of embellishing, and you can see here that I changed out that plus sign paper to that grid paper. And I really like this a lot better. I think it's brighter. I like the pattern more. It's a little bit more subtle, and I just like it. So I'm going to go with that. I also cut one of those journaling spots out of that stitched rectangle die set at the bottom from that same grid paper. So you can see that one. And then I also cut another journaling card at the bottom there with just some craft. So I'm just showing how I switched up that paper. I like that better. I'm just explaining there what I've already explained to you, that I just like how that looks. And I changed out the paper that was in the photo mat as well, from that plus sign paper to just some plain white paper. Now you can also see that I've trimmed down, and I'm just showing you that now. I've trimmed down the layout and I mounted it onto some white cardstock and then onto a red grid paper. And that's the very outside frame that you see. It's a really old Stampin' Up! Designer Series paper. And I just like how that looks. I like how it looks really finished that way. It just brings your eye into the layout, and instead of off the edge, I like it. I like how it finishes it. And I do this on lots and lots of my layouts, more and more all the time. I just really like the way it finishes it off. So I'm just talking about that there. Also, I'm going to tell you a little bit too about the different embellishments that I've added to the layout also. And I'm going to show you here what I did up at the top is I trimmed out those tags and I've got those in there. And then what I did was I took a couple of circle punches, 1 3/8 and a 1 1/4 punch. And I cut one of those grid paper circles in both red and white. The red is taken from that paper that's around the outside edge. I just lifted the edge up and put my circle punch in there. Nobody's ever going to see that because it's going to be in a page protector. This little die cut word that says home on it is from one of those fall kits I mentioned. I like how that is going to be layered up at the top. I mean, the journaling is going to be about how this was Jordan's home. For the last, year and a half that he was living away from home. This is the stamp set that came in the Acorn Avenue Scrapbook on Cards Today kit. Love this stamp set so much. It is gorgeous. There's so many neat elements to it, and I use quite a few different stamps from this stamp set on this layout today. So I'll show you some of those things as we go through, but I definitely used that leaf. And this really works perfectly because the city where Jordan was living, or the province, is Ontario, and they have the largest maple trees and maple leaves I've ever seen in my life. It's amazing, and I just thought those maple leaves were perfect. I stamped this top one out in the archival ink in fossilized amber. That's one of the new distress ink colors in the archival ink. And I then just fussy cut it out, and I really like how that turned out. Then I'm also showing you here how I cut out those 2 journaling spots at the bottom, just using that stitched rectangle die. I used just repeated 2 of the papers from other areas in the layout in those journaling spots at the bottom. It just brings everything together, right? So the one journaling card there that's on the left that I'm just touching there now, that's that grid paper from the second strip from the top. It just brings us that paper repeats that same element of the layout in another spot. So this little die cut I thought was really super cute. I mean, Jordan had some flowers growing out front of their place, and I just thought that was kind of reminiscent of that. I'm not going to end up using that wood veneer word explore at the bottom. That word doesn't really fit what I'm going to be talking about here. I like the idea of the wood veneer and the text, the scripty font, but it just didn't work. So I'm just showing you here. I'm going to use some of these other stamps on these journaling spot areas on the bottom of the layout just to add a little bit more detail. And this is one of the little wood veneer, or not wood veneer, but wood grain sequins that was in one of the kits. And I'm going to use those in a few different areas here. The suggestion on the sketch, I'm assuming, is maybe enamel dots or something like that. And so I'm going to use some enamel dots, but I'm also going to use one of those wood grain sequins in each of my 3 little triangle areas. So I'm just showing you the triangle, the visual triangle that I'm trying to create here. from the top right hand corner diagonally down to the photo and then to the cluster on the bottom right of the photograph. So I'm going to show you here. What am I going to show you here? I'm going to show you some embossing of this leaf. So I didn't want all of the leaves to look the same. I wanted 3 different leaves. And here you can see a little hodgepodge of some supplies for my stash, including some archival ink. And then I wanted to use this little sepia VersaFine ink. The really nice thing about the VersaFine ink is it dries very slowly, and it's really great to use for heat embossing. So I'm going to put that onto that leaf stamp. I'm going to stamp it out onto some white cardstock, and I'm going to cover that with some Ranger Clear embossing powder. So here's that embossing powder here. I was thinking about using that spoon, but then I just grabbed this little Studio Cadia triangle tray. And it's a really good way to get a bunch of your embossing powder onto an area very quickly. And now what I'm going to do is just heat up my heat gun. Great thing about a voiceover is you don't have to listen to the really noisy heat tool. I am going to just really let that heat tool get nice and warm before I take it to the paper. Just take this opportunity to clean up my area a little bit and get rid of any embossing powder that's on there. But you can see as that embossing powder melts, it just really adds a nice detail to this leaf. So I'm going to have one leaf that's kind of a brown color that goes with that fawn colored textured cardstock. I'm going to have one leaf that's the fossilized amber, which is kind of like the mustard color that's on the layout. And then I'm going to stamp that leaf out again using some, see if I can remember the color. I'm actually just going to look. Aged Mahogany, I think, is the name of the color, in a Distress Oxide ink. And that color just matches really nicely with the kind of fall red that I've got going on here. So there's those 3 leaves that I'm going to be using on this layout. Now, what I wanted to do next is I wanted to get rid of the green on this little die cut piece. I didn't want to introduce any green into this layout. I know green would look really pretty, but I just felt like I already had enough colors, and I just felt like it would just be kind of Christmassy with the red. So I'm going to take my Versamark pen, which is great for adding Versamark ink to small areas. It's really easy to control, obviously. So I'm going to just put that Versamark ink on the stems and the leaves of this flower. And then I'm going to take my Brutus Monroe Gilded embossing powder. This is a really pretty gold embossing powder. I'm going to add that onto my die cut piece. I'm just going to take, and sorry for leaning across there. I think it's kind of apropos that I've got a maple leaf on the sleeve of my shirt. Anyways, so I am going to just take this tiny little brush, and I am going to get any of that gold embossing powder off of the areas that I don't want it. And once I am done that, I am going to heat this up just in the same way that you saw me do that leaf. And that's going to add just a really pretty gold embossing to this die cut piece. And I did want to add a little bit of gold to this layout anyways, just because I thought that it really fits with what's going on here with the, I end up adding some gold thread, and I've got a couple of little alphas, numerical numbers. What am I trying to say? Numbers as part of my title that have gold dipping on them. I'm actually really tired tonight. I don't really know why for sure, but I am just feeling exhausted. So I'm hoping this voiceover is making sense. Anyways, so I'm going to get that embossing powder all tidied up. And I'm just showing you again that Versamark pen. That is a great thing to have in your stash. It's a great little tool, and I really love having that for all those little areas I might want to emboss. So I really like how that looks. You can see how it's nice and shiny. It's going to add that nice little bit of gold down to that corner. And hopefully I'm going to push the layout up a little bit here because I'm kind of working off frame. I was thinking about what I wanted to add for alphas for the title, and I thought about adding some gold. I thought about a bunch of different things. Wood veneer. I thought about these phrase stickers. I think they're really neat, but they were just a little bit too dark. I placed them on the layout, and I had a really neat idea. I thought that, I would put happy day on there because it was a happy day. This is just like the day before Jordan moved back home. But I didn't like the color of the alphas. I just thought that they were too dark. And this layout is already a little bit on the dark side, right? It's not a really super bright and cheery color scheme, that's for sure. It's definitely like fall and masculine. And so you'll see I am going to add some white alphas for my title, which I think are just nice and bright. So I'm going to pop a bunch of things up here on some foam adhesive and start my layering. I'm going to pop that word home up, or I've popped that up. I've got this little wooden button that I know that I want to add in there to that little cluster up at the top. Just thinking about placement and where I want to put everything else. And here you can see now I'm basically finished up. So I've got that word cherry there. And I like how those alphas, those white foam alphas, are just really nice and bright. I'm just showing you here, I added the wood sequin, the sequin up there, a couple of other little dots up there. I've got some gold thread that I just wound around my finger and stuck in behind that word home. And I added that gold thread in a couple of other places in both of the leaf cluster areas. Just showing you here, the suggestion for the title was down below onto the journaling card, but I didn't like that. For my layout, I wanted it to be up on that line there and a little bit larger. So just to kind of add a little bit of detail to that area there. So it says Cherry 24. The 24 is in wood veneer alphas that are gold dipped. So it brings that gold in another spot. And I'm just showing you, I put another little wood button down at the bottom by the photo. I kind of thought maybe it looked like it was navy blue. So all I did was I took my little circle punch. I cut a circle out of the black patterned paper that's on the layout. I stuck it on that wooden button, and I just put some glazing medium over top of it, and it just made it look like the actual epoxy on a wooden button. So here you can see I'm just pointing out my journaling areas here that I've stamped. I stamped the date on the one that's on the left, and you can see the numbers that are part of that stamp set. So 08/29/19, and then the word date above it. And then the little journaling card that's blank says the facts and a colon, and that's where I'm going to add some of the journaling. That is basically the layout. I am pretty much done, and just showing you some of the other little things. Like I added a little sticker to the bottom of the journaling card that says be happy. And I did not add the journaling on camera. I will do that by hand. I'll handwrite that into that little craft journaling card. I hope that you were not too bored with this voiceover. It's pretty long. This is an exceptionally long video, but the actual video before I edit it down was over an hour. So I did a lot of talking. I feel like I've kind of captured the essence of what I said when I did the live video. So I hope that everything made sense. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I really appreciate it. And please don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe. I'd love to have you as a new subbie on my channel. And also, make sure you leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of the layout today. Did you like the color scheme? Do you like the design of the layout? Do you like how I interpreted the sketch? Etc., etc. I would love to hear from you. That would be awesome. Thanks so much, guys, for stopping by, and I hope to see you another time on my channel. And I hope that you had an amazing day, and I hope tomorrow you have even more of an amazing day than you had today. Goodbye, and I'll see you again.